All right, this is Chapter 2, Section 3 on deductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning is the process of using logic to draw conclusions from given facts, definitions, and properties. This is where you get to sit and just think about these problems and try and come up with an answer. So we're going to be using two laws in our deductive reasoning. One is the law of detachment. The law of detachment says is if we have a conditional statement, P then Q, where that's hypothesis then conclusion. So if our conditional statement is a true statement and P, the hypothesis, is true, then Q, the conclusion, is true. And that's kind of confusing to say, so we're going to be looking at a couple different examples. First example I have here, if you're given the conditional statement, if you are tardy 3 times, you must go to detention. They also give you that Shia, or Shay, I don't know how to pronounce that, is in detention. Their conjecture, their educated guess, is that Shay was tardy at least 3 times. So given the law of detachment, what you're really kind of looking at is the hypothesis. You see, the hypothesis in our conditional has to be true, and it has to match with the statement that they give you. In this example, the hypothesis, P, is you are tardy 3 times. What you need to look at is, does that match with the statement they give you? Shay is in detention. In this case, no. One says you are tardy 3 times. One says Shay is in detention. They're not the same. So we cannot use the law of detachment to make this conjecture that Shay was tardy at least 3 times. She could have hit somebody or done something else bad. So this would be invalid. So that is an invalid statement. We'll look at another example here. Given that the conditional, if 2 segments are congruent, then they have the same length. And they tell you that AB is congruent to XY. So again, we're comparing the hypothesis, 2 segments are congruent, with what they give you. That segment AB is congruent to XY. So in this case, they do match. 2 segments are congruent. Segment AB is congruent to segment XY. Since they match, our conjecture that AB is equal to XY, those measures, are going to be equal. So this is a valid statement. Try and write that a little bit better here. That is a valid statement because the law of detachment allows us to make that conjecture. Another example. If we're given the conditional statement, if a student passes his classes, the student is eligible to play sports. Ramon passed his classes. So our conjecture, Ramon is eligible to play sports. Again, we're comparing that hypothesis, a student passes his classes, with the statement they give you. Ramon passes his classes. Those match. Since they match, we can use the law of detachment to say the conclusion must be true, that Ramon is eligible to play sports. So this is a valid statement. Valid statement. So that's the law of detachment. We're going to look at another law here, the law of syllogism. So it's a little more confusing. It says if we have 2 conditional statements, if Q then P, or excuse me, if P then Q, and if Q then R are true statements, then P then R is a true statement. Some of you have asked, where does the letter R come from? I think it's just the next one in the alphabet. They needed 2 conditional statements. If P then Q, and if Q then R. 2 different conditionals. And what the law of syllogism says is that if the conclusion in the first conditional, Q, matches with the hypothesis in the second conditional, Q, then we can jump straight from P all the way to R. That's where you get this right here, P then R. We're essentially eliminating that middle step. So as an example of this, I'm given two conditional statements. If a number is divisible by 4, then it is divisible by 2. And if a number is even, then it is divisible by 2. So their conjecture is that if a number is divisible by 4, then it is even. Now, we're not here to decide whether there are any counterexamples or anything like that. We're just here to look at the given statements and determine, based on the law of syllogism, can we make this conjecture? Is this a valid conjecture? And to do that, we're going to match the conclusion in the first statement, it is divisible by 2, with the hypothesis in the second, a number is even. Since those are not the same, we cannot necessarily make the jump from a number is divisible by 4 to it is divisible by 2. They have to match. And so this would be, based on the law of syllogism, invalid. Because they don't match. Now I'll give another example. So again, two conditional statements. If you fly from Texas to California, you travel from the Central to the Pacific time zone. If you travel from the Central to the Pacific time zone, then you gain 2 hours. So their conjecture, if you fly from Texas to California, you gain 2 hours. So again, we're going to look at the conclusion in the first conditional. You travel from the Central to the Pacific time zone. And we're going to look at the hypothesis in the second conditional. You travel from the Central to the Pacific time zone. If those match, which in this case they do match, then we can essentially eliminate them and jump straight from the top, if you fly from Texas to California, all the way to the last statement. Then you gain 2 hours. And this conjecture is true. It is a valid conjecture. That's how the law of syllogism works. It takes a lot of practice, takes a little bit of time to get used to it. So, yeah, good luck.